Hello, Sergey.
Good afternoon.
This is the Toachi Pilaton Cascade in Ecuador. It was revitalized by Tiazmash company from Russia. But a couple of years ago, RusHydro designated Latin America as a zone of interest to it, a zone of priority presence. If it's not a secret, what is being done?
Latin America has always been of interest to the Russian Federation, and in the past to the Soviet Union, and today remains a region with one of the most untapped hydropower potentials. Of course, hydropower is a priority area of development for Latin America, but unfortunately, problems also exist. We are well aware of these problems. We try to participate in achieving goals tasks and help our colleagues. One of the elements of our presence is life cycle engineering. In particular, we can talk about a large station, probably the largest station in Ecuador, Coca-Codo Sinclair. You probably know that there is an extremely specific problem with the Coca riverbed, which is being destroyed by erosion. Unfortunately, this process cannot be stopped, but it can be controlled. Of course, one of the priorities is to preserve the current plant, which accounts for more than 50% of the country's energy mix.
And this is Ecuador. What else in the neighborhood?
Well, you know, Latin America is very big.
And domestic science, thought and industry have long been present in it.
It's true.
Take, for example, the Salto Grande on the border of Argentina and Uruguay, which is on the opposite end of the continent.
It's true. And one of the important elements of our cooperation is cooperation in the field of scientific and technical partnership. Of course, it's always great to talk about the objects that can be seen and discussed, but as a rule, science goes deeper. And modern solutions concerning spillways, dams, and the engine room are still the result of scientific research and scientific discoveries. Therefore, as the Russian Federation, we participate in the work of a large global association called the International Commission on Large Dams. And by the way, this commission, which currently includes 103 countries, has a vice president for Latin America. Just recently, in 2025, the vice president for Latin America was re-elected in China, and he is the current director of Latin America's largest hydropower station, Itaipu.
This is on the border of Brazil and Paraguay.
Exactly so.
I see. And by the way, when the geopolitical crisis broke out 4 years ago, I remember there were problems with the admission of Russian power engineers to these international councils and so on. It's all settled now, right?
You know, problems remain, but still common sense is winning. Indeed, there was a period when we did not participate in the active work of international communities, but today our voice is heard. The tasks that we are solving within the framework of the Russian National Committee and the world energy industry in general are very serious, and the experience we have is very different. For example, from the experience of working in Latin America. Nevertheless, it is a very important element of the stability and safety of operation of all hydroelectric power plants worldwide.
Both Russia and Latin America went through a very interesting test when the Europeans put forward the idea that reservoirs emit such methane emissions that hydropower cannot be called green. Well, it's clear that the story is over because scientific data from both Russia and Latin America was presented, and by the way, from the same Itaipu on the border of Brazil and Paraguay. But speaking generally about the challenges facing the hydropower industry in the world, what should be done? Surely, first of all, in Russia and Latin America, the places we're discussing.
You know, there is no limit to perfection, and we have already discussed many times that the development of hydropower is a key element in the development of energy systems as a whole. Of course, reservoirs are elements of increased CO2 and methane emissions during the setup and initial period of operation. But you know perfectly well, and thanks to your work, this information has become available to the whole world, that the more mature reservoirs are still active CO2 sinks. Therefore, if we listen to the incompetent opinion of biased colleagues that hydropower is a bad element of development of today's world, then we will go nowhere. This is the first one. The second very important task that hydropower solves is, of course, the accumulation and use of large amounts of fresh water. In addition, the regulation of long-term runoff, including flood management, is a priority task today, it seems to me. Using the examples of the Russian Federation and Latin America, global climate change is very noticeable. However, we cannot stand by. And in this regard, hydropower and responsible water use are key elements. Therefore, no matter how much they talk about how interesting or unpromising we are, our work is essential.
The last thing I'm going to ask here. We are now standing in Ecuador, but for my question I will return to Moscow. Some time ago, RusHydro presented its developments on artificial intelligence in the State Duma with a disclaimer that the AI was needed more as an analyst still managed by a person. Is there a fantastic prospect that artificial intelligence will take over everything?
In theory, yes, but in practice, life is a little more complicated than many people imagine. Of course, artificial intelligence is already in service in the energy sector, including monitoring the condition of the power transmission networks of the main equipment. Individual elements that can already interface with artificial intelligence and control certain elements of automated process control systems also exist. The safety of hydraulic structures and the lifespan control for the main electromechanical equipment are also tasks that artificial intelligence is engaged in today. Big data, which is quickly processed by artificial intelligence, is a big plus. But you were right to say that there is a degree of responsibility of a person who should still be present, including at such serious and important facilities. Of course, hydropower, and in particular a dam, is an object of increased danger. Therefore, for today, artificial intelligence cannot replace humans yet. I can give you one example that does not relate to hydropower. You know perfectly well that when we fly by airplanes, we are sure that for some period of the flight, we fly on autopilot. Well, imagine a situation where an airplane is full. The aircraft captain comes out and says, "Thank you very much. Today you are flying with artificial intelligence. The plane will be controlled by autopilot, and I will go drink some coffee." I think most people will get off this plane. The situation is exactly the same in our case.
Thank you, Sergey. Thank you.